the Clinton Hell's Kitchen Land Use Committee meeting. It's our May meeting, preceding our May board meeting. We are conducting our meeting based on the governor's executive order to allow us to do virtual meetings and allow us to take votes and actions on our activities while we are in a virtual space. Anybody who's participating tonight, the proceedings are typically that we'll have a presentation from an applicant or a developer or something. Discussion will follow by committee members asking questions. Then we'll open up to the public, that the public could offer insight, questions, suggestions, or comments, and then we'll come back to committee for any votes or actions. Anybody who is dialing in tonight, if you want to participate, to raise hand. If you're on the phone, you use *9 to raise and lower your hand, and you use *6 to mute and unmute. Any public attendees who wish to speak during the public sessions of the meeting will migrate you over from attendee to panelist, and then you'll be able to join the conversation then. I'd like to start by, and tonight on the agenda we have 2 items. We have a discussion on a Tishman Speyer proposal at Block 4 at Hudson Boulevard, and then we're going to follow that with a discussion and vote, our final vote on the ULURP application for what we refer to as the DEP site on 10th Avenue. I'd like to begin by having the committee members introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with my co-chair, JD.
Good evening. I'm JD on the board. Welcome.
Thank you, JD. Frank?
Hi, Frank Hall-Zubiak, committee member.
Leslie?
Leslie Williams, committee member.
Brian?
Hi, Brian Weber, public member.
Bob?
Yep. Hi, Bob Benfato, public member of the Land Use Committee.
Chris?
Christopher LeBron, committee member.
Dave Solnick?
Yes, committee member, David Solnick. Hello.
Hello. Dolores?
Sorry, had to click a lot of buttons there. Dolores Rubin, also on the committee.
Thank you, Dolores. Who am I missing? I think I've gotten everybody. Ted?
Hi, Ted Arenas, committee member.
Thank you, Ted. And I'd like to thank Jesse Bodine, our district manager, and Janine, who we can't do anything without them. That's their role. They just make us work. They make us function. With that all being said, unless I've forgotten something in the introductory phases, let's just begin with the meeting. So our first item on the agenda is an application from Tishman Speyer with a proposed zoning text amendment for 99 Hudson Boulevard, which is adjacent to Block 4 of the parkland of Belle Abzouk Park and Hudson Boulevard. Before we begin with the applicant, I've asked Bob Benfato to give everybody on the committee a little bit of perspective on the history of what's going on in that area. What is Hudson Boulevard, Belle Abzouk Park? What has happened there? Because this has been a many year development process, and some of us are newer to this, so I wanted to get a little bit of perspective on the blocks. So Bob, would you give us a couple minutes on that?
Sure. Patty put together a PowerPoint for us. We can do it this quickly.
Great. And Bob, you want to say who Patty is?
Yes, Patty Maltezos is the Director of Planning and Development for the Hudson Yards Hell's Kitchen bid. She's the boss. So you can go to the first slide. They, as people know, the park opened up in 2015. Not the whole park, the half of it. This picture here shows you the schematic of the full design. We refer to the park, we break it down by blocks. So it's block 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The first 3 were built. That opened up in 2015. That's blocks 1, 2, and 3. We're here tonight to talk about block 4, which is partly done, mostly done, but still has a little bit. Each block consists of park area and a boulevard east and a boulevard west. except for blocks 1 and 2, which have no Boulevard West because it would be over the MTA station, the 7 train, and the MTA won't allow a street over the station. And there it is. Patty? Or Janine? Can you go to the next one? That's the 3 that were designed. That's the schematic of what it's supposed to look like. That actually is pretty good if you were even today to look up top and straight down on blocks 1, 2, and 3, just the park, ignoring the buildings around it. That's pretty much what it looks like. In the next picture. This is block 1. As you know, the whole park is now called Bella Abzug Park. It's named after a congresswoman from the 70s who represented, she's from the village, from what I remember, but I believe this area, which didn't actually exist at the time, was part of her congressional district. So this is what block 1 looks like. We told everyone to get out of the way so we could have a nice no people picture. Janine, you can, next picture. That's, we do public art in the park. He's not there anymore. That was King Niami. He was there during the pandemic, and a couple of months after things started to open up again. He was very, very popular, actually, even during the pandemic. We wanted to keep him longer, but the Cincinnati Zoo bought him. So soon thereafter, he moved on. Janine, next one. This is block 2. It's the fountains. There's another public art. That's a cicada. The wings were made out of what I repurposed, what was it? In a car, windshields to create the wings. It looked actually very nice in person. And those are the fountains that are operating today in block 2. Block 2 is also where the Spiral, which is a Tishman Speyer property, is going to be opening later this year. Next picture. We occasionally do events. This is an event from last year in block 2 that was very popular. We recently had our spring event in the park, which was April 23rd and 24th, which was even more crowded than this. It filtered all the way over into block 1. Next one. This is the playground. This is in block 3. There's a small little playground. Ultimately, block 6 is going to be all playground, and block 6 also has no boulevards. It's all park from one end to the other. Next slide. This is further pictures of block 3. You can see there on the right, sort of an orange building. That's the kiosk. The building that's in construction there is actually up and open for people. That's Rock Rose's new residential development. Next picture. This is the opening on April 13th of that kiosk. It's called Paradis. They serve food out of there. They also do catering. Those are the 2 owners with the big scissors. The gentleman actually with the glasses in the background is the revenue director for the Parks Department. He's smiling because it's finally opening up and there's revenue. Next picture. And this is, I'll let Tishman Speyer show pretty pictures of block 4. I just want to discuss blocks 5 and 6. I wanted to get a generic picture and the timeline from HYDC. They refused to give it to me for whatever reason. They just wouldn't. I was actually tempted to take an old picture of theirs, leave the logo, blur it out and put classified on top of it. But I went ahead since I knew what the dates were. So these are the dates for blocks 5 and 6 as presently considered. Completed construction you see in the bottom is 2027. It close out, that would be 2028. That means HYDC closing out. Remember, these are just suggested dates. I don't put money on them. That's what they're in the design right now. The schematic design says Q4 of 22, but MBVA, which will design all the other 4 blocks, they're designing 5 and 6. They've been negotiating with Amtrak, so things are ongoing, and it's being built through bonds. It's not necessarily, it's not really city funds or capital funds, per se. It's Hudson Yards bonds that they float that take care of it. That's how the park and the streets and the train station have been built. And one of the things we're doing with the park, since it's like these blocks with the boulevard on the street, is we've been trying to do shared streets. And we've been working on shared streets on blocks 1 and 2 with Related and Tishman Speyer. We're gonna go into construction with them probably in late summer, early fall. the bid is overseeing it. Patty would be like the construction manager for it, but we're getting reimbursed by Related and Tishman Speyer for those projects. And what we hope to do that periodically going forward. When you discuss block 4, you'll see the difficulty on block 4 in doing that is the property that abuts the street that's to be done is built. So there's no way of getting money out of them to get reimbursement for it. So we have to look for other means to do that. And Patty's going to give a discussion now quickly, a minute and a half on the shared streets. Patty?
Yes, hello, everyone. Janine, if you could go to the next slide, it shows. So this is a map of the park again, blocks 1 through 6. And I just want to point out how much of the street takes up, this area. So the bid has always been looking for ways to expand the park. And over COVID, we saw a huge shift change internally with DOT and allowing shared streets as sort of recovery projects, expanding open space and making it more pedestrian friendly. So we started with blocks 1 and blocks 2, but then we kept thinking, why stop there? We want to expand it throughout the park. So you can see Hudson Boulevard East is the longer boulevard. It goes all the way from 33rd to 38th. And then, terminus is at block 6. And Hudson Boulevard West is just 35th to 38th. But if you go to the next slide, you can see sort of our vision for all of these blocks having, interconnected shared streets. The purple and the blue are just sort of preliminary. They're not designed. They're just showing, where cars or people could go. But this is where we're headed, and we're working very hard with all of our various stakeholders to make this sort of a reality, because it is a partnership between the park and then the stakeholder on the other side of the street. But as Bob said, we are doing blocks 1 and 2 first as a pilot. If you go to the next slide, you can see this is our sort of design detail. The bid will be going to the Transportation Committee next month to talk about this. So if you guys have additional questions or really want to hear how the shared street will function, please attend. And then in the next slide, you can see, so this is a rough rendering of what it would look like to be on a shared street. So very pedestrian accessible, people can cross at any point. Cars are not allowed to park, but they can drive through slowly. And there's a ton more amenities. So furniture, planters, and it would open up programmatic opportunities to close the street, for example, every day during lunch, or have a kids activity there on Saturdays, stuff like that. So this is the direction that we're going in, and we are working with all of our stakeholders to make that happen. Yeah, so if anyone has any brief questions before we move on.
If there are no questions, Paul, I just wanted to make a comment.
I'm sorry, Bob, before I do, just Patty, can you tell us the distinction between a shared street and a permanent shared street? Because I think that's going to come up in our conversation later.
Sure. The design is exactly the same. It's just the material treatment is different. So a permanent shared street would be concrete, and a temporary shared street is paint and, flexible delineators.
Okay, thank you. All right, sorry, Bob. Good.
The other thing with the permit also is where you see the painted areas with the planters, those things would actually be raised up to meet the curves of the sidewalks that are there. And so the street itself would run through it.
Great, thanks.
The other thing I just wanted to say is, if we're done here, no one has any questions, since I'm on the committee, I run the Business Improvement District, and Tishman Speyer's on the board, so I'm conflicted out, so I can't speak. I can speak, as I understand, if anyone wants to ask me a question later on during their presentation. But if there are anything that comes up that the bid could answer, Patty would do that. Although
Can
I
I
see
ask a quick
now that
question?
Leslie and David have questions.
Yep. All right, Leslie, go ahead.
I just have a quick question, Chair. Who would be responsible for the cleaning of the area?
The shared street,
Yes,
the bid.
the bid would be. Okay.
Thank you, Leslie. David?
And the street, are there any thoughts about the street surface yet? Not the painted one, but the more permanent one?
Not yet. You mean the material, David?
Right.
No, we haven't gotten to that point with DOT, but I'm sure there are guidelines about what would be used.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so let's move now into the presentation from Tishman Speyer, Amira Michelle. Go.
Great. I'm going to take it, Paul. Thank you so much. And thank you, JD. It's really wonderful to see so many people together and Community Board 4, Jesse and Janine, you do such a terrific job and are so professional and easy to work with. So thank you for that. My name is Michelle Adams, and I'm the Senior Managing Director of Global Public Affairs for Tishman Speyer. Tonight, joining me proudly, we have Amir Sperling, who heads up Tishman Speyer's development of the Spiral building, which was alluded to during this park presentation, which is on Block 2, and the site that we'll be speaking about tonight on Block 4, 99 Hudson Boulevard. We have also brought with us David Karnofsky, who is an esteemed attorney, a man of great wise counsel to many of us, and in his former life worked with the city of New York and city planning, and is no stranger to anything related to zoning matters. So I'm sure there'll be many robust conversations for David. He currently sits at the law firm of Fried Frank, and we're honored to have him with us tonight. So this evening, we're going to do a short PowerPoint deck to catch everybody up on where we are and where we'd like to go. And I just wanted to take a stroll down memory lane for 1 second, if I may, that 7 years ago, Tishman Speyer embarked on this unbelievable journey with many of you here on this Zoom. And Dolores was the chairwoman at the time. I see obviously JD's here and Joe's here and David's here. And I don't know if I don't see Christine, but so many of you have been with us throughout this process. And it really has been a labor of love for Tishman Speyer. And I say that because we all came together and there was a plan for Block 4. And I think there were a lot of people, and many of you remember, standing over the model and moving trees and rocks. And we actually brought a very large scale model to Rockefeller Center and had people come in to look at it, to move rocks and shrubbery and plantings and materials and benches. And we are very close to turning over the keys to, almost, and the key here is almost, a fully completed park. And so tonight, we want to talk to all of you and start the conversation about how we can complete the park, complete the journey together. We know there's going to be a lot of questions. We know this is round 1. Again, we're not looking for a vote this evening, want to have a conversation. We came through a global pandemic together and we kept working the entire time. So we're thrilled to be here. We want to finish what we started. We know there's going to be some twists and turns, but we're excited to be with all of you. So that, I'm going to turn it over to Amir to run through the deck.
Thanks, Michelle. And it's good to be with all of you and talk about the next and final stage of the park. And I'm going to try to share the presentation. And does everyone see that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, terrific. So I'm going, because of the introductory remarks, I'm going to move quickly through this because I think the presentation that Bob and Patty gave was helpful in establishing context for the location. This map again shows the blocks of Bella Abzug Park, both current and planned, and specifically 99 Hudson Boulevard, which is a site that Tishman Speyer owns and will be the site of a future commercial development. And adjacent to that, Block 4, which you now all have context for, Bella Abzug Park. Just moving ahead, this map zooms in on that area, shows you 99 Hudson Boulevard in red, and then the footprint of the mapped park and the mapped streets that flank the park, both on the west side, Hudson Boulevard West, and on the east side, Hudson Boulevard East. Again, I refer to them as mapped because they are what is in the zoning now and when we first encountered this project, as Michelle said, 7 years ago. So as a sort of introductory agenda, if you will, just so you know where we're heading with this and you don't wait until the end to hear what the elements of this. first, I'll run through a brief history of the last 7 years in terms of how all the pieces came together. We'll cover quickly, as Michelle said, sort of where we are on the portion of the park and the western roadway that's complete and turning over soon. Then I'll talk to you about the city planning application that we're preparing for this second and final phase, which involves two elements. One is what's called a contribution in kind, which is a mechanism that exists currently in the zoning, which is the approach through which a developer like us constructs a portion of, in this case, a park or roadway that the city designed and approved, and in exchange for that receives an equivalent a value of development rights. So in this case, we'll go through it, but the budget that's being negotiated with the city would generate approximately 5 floors worth of development rights for the 99 Hudson Boulevard project. And the second element of the planning application is a text change for the zoning that's required in order for the 99 Hudson Boulevard site to accept these development rights, because as of right currently, we are hitting the max of the rights that we can use. So those are the two elements. We'll talk more about it. We'll also touch on another element of this, which is a proposed contribution that Tishman Speyer would make to the community through the bid as a part of this work. And then we'll take the committee's questions and hopefully respond to all of your inquiries. So that's the roadmap. Very quickly, this was a satellite shot of the site back in 2014. Again, the red dashed area is the footprint of the future commercial development. The blue dashed outline is the footprint of the mapped park and streets as it looked at the time. Really was a rail cut with Amtrak line running through it and a couple of other buildings that we'll talk about. Moving ahead, we talked about the redesign effort. Michelle talked about the large scale model that we had. This was an effort that took 18 months, involved us and the community, including CB4 and HYDC and all the city agencies. And in the early part of 2017, this design was approved by CB4. This is a rendering at the time and pretty true to reality, as we'll show in a second. Just in terms of the way these pieces all came together, this map shows a couple of things. The 99 Hudson Boulevard footprint to the left, and then this green, upside down L, which is land that Tishman Speyer acquired at the same time we acquired the 99 site itself. And so this green area already sat in the footprint of the boulevard on the west and a portion of the planned fourth block of the park. So that we owned that at the time. Obviously that was a good start, but sort of a little bit of a funky shape. And we always had it as part of our collective vision to do what we could to flesh it out, square it out, and make progress on building the full park. So the first thing we did is, for the land that we controlled, we entered into an agreement with the city, and the city ultimately authorized the first use ever of this in-kind contribution mechanism, which, as I said, was in the zoning. This goes back to when David Karnofsky was at the city and drafting these rules, but it had never been used before. And through that mechanism, we committed to build this area of the park and the western roadway. And again, the trade is all the costs that we expended on this work were translated in a formula that I'll share with you later into rights, development rights that we would have otherwise just written a check to the city for, but instead we did this trade. So right after we got the first piece approved, we true to our word, we said, we're not going to stop there. We're going to keep moving forward. There had been on this lot 17 at the bottom, there had been a 2-story building with an auto body repair shop and some other businesses. We signed a purchase contract for that. It's called lot 17. And we worked to, again, with the city and HYDC, negotiated a budget and did a second in-kind contribution, and then closed on the acquisition of that lot, and then started construction of everything that you see here that's not gray. And as Michelle mentioned, that work is complete. We are about to turn it over to the city. Here's what it looks like today from the air. It is truly beautiful. We can't wait to have some pictures like Bob showed of, a lot of people in there inhabiting it, but this is what it looks like. And we definitely would like to invite the community to come see it, and we can figure out when that is, even if it's in advance of the turnover.
Yes, for sure. We're going to do that just so everybody knows. And we're going to do it hopefully in the summer when it's warm and we can all be together. That's really important to us.
So what's left? I'm calling it phase 2. That's just my nomenclature, but essentially it's the portion on the east side, which is again is part of the mapped and approved design. And currently there are a couple of privately owned parcels that sit right in the footprint of that, which is both the roadway and some pieces of the northeast portion of the park. And the idea behind doing that is to, again, finish what we always said we wanted to start and finish, and hopefully allow the kind of flexibility that was mentioned by Bob and Patty in terms of using that space for whatever the community priorities are, including the possibility of a shared street. So just to specifically talk about it, there's sort of two pieces here, one in blue outline and one in red outline. And we distinguish between the two because they're going to be secured in different ways, which I'll talk about in a second. So the blue one is a townhouse building that currently houses an aquarium supply store and some office space. And the red areas are actually vacant right now. They sit next to a building, a multifamily building that's already built just to the right or east of that. And here's some photos of them. So the blue again is the townhouse building. You see that in the top left corner. And Tishman Speyer has that building under contract, and contingent on the approvals that we're seeking and talking about here today, we would close on that acquisition and take control of that site. The red areas are ones that the city is on the precipice of condemning, probably in the matter of weeks. And you see what it looks like right now, essentially sort of an alley roadway. So those are the two areas. So here's the sort of why and how of the plan. The 99 Hudson Boulevard site per zoning can build a maximum density of 21.6 times the floor area of the site. And essentially that bucket has been filled through the earlier actions, the earlier in-kind contributions that I mentioned. So in order to do what's left, we'd have to expand the bucket. And so that's why I mentioned at the outset that the planning application comprises that we're assembling now and looking to file in the next couple of months has two elements. One is the in-kind contribution. Again, this would be the third one we are doing. And just like the other ones, what happens is, and I'll go through this on the next slide, a budget is established for the acquisition and construction of the blue box, and then it's translated into rights. And those rights we project would allow 99 Hudson Boulevard to build about 5 floors more. So instead of 43 floors, about 48. And we'll show you a side-by-side in a few slides. The second element is, in order to formally expand that available bandwidth for accepting those rights, there's a text change that would increase the density that's allowable on the site from 21.6 up to 24. A maximum of 24. And the logic behind the 24 is that that's exactly what matches the allowable density on the block immediately to the south. So that's the logic in it. As I said, that application is being assembled now. We expect it will be filed in the next couple of months, and then the review process involving the community board and the planning commission and the city council will follow. And the expectation is, if all of those steps go as planned, the Planning Commission would vote on this by year end. But what I want to say, just to sort of reiterate how this is all done, because we don't want there to be any misconceptions about how this in-kind contribution works, just for a brief overview of how this is all determined. Essentially, at a high level, it's essentially a system whereby a developer such as ourselves takes the approved design, prices it out, negotiates a budget with HYDC, which has a review conducted by its own independent third-party consultants. They decide what costs the city will agree to reimburse. We then reconcile our estimates. HYDC then lets the City Planning Commission know that it believes the budget as finalized is reasonable. And then on that basis, the City Planning Commission authorizes the in-kind contribution and converts that budget into a certain number of development rights. They're called district improvement bonus rights. And as an example at the bottom, we just take an illustration. We say the current price of one of those DIB or district improvement bonus rights is about $143 today. It adjusts every year. So if the budget that we and HYDC collectively negotiate is $10 million, and the City Planning Commission authorizes that, the way they determine how many rights go to 99 Hudson Boulevard in this case is they take the $10 million, they divide it by the 143 in round numbers, and the result, in this case, for example, 70,000 feet of rights is what goes to the site. So this is exactly the same mechanism that was used for the earlier rounds that I discussed. The only difference now is the second piece of this, which is we need more capacity at 99 in order to accept these rights. I promised you a side-by-side comparison, and here it is. So on the left is, and again, we're in the earliest stages of design for this building, so I wouldn't take anything away from this in terms of materiality or really shape. This is a simple extrusion of a rectangle, but we wanted you to see that on the left at the current massing, you get to about 43 floors. And I know it's teeny tiny writing, but it's about 685 feet in terms of the elevation. And on the right, assuming that the extra 5 floors of entitlements were authorized by the Planning Commission, we get to about 745 feet. So that's the difference, about 5 floors. So again, as I mentioned, if we get the required approvals, let's say by year end, the current timeline that we're estimating is that this remaining phase would be complete in roughly 2025. The only other thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned a community contribution earlier. So as part of this effort, and when we first started talking about it a few years ago with the community board and with Bob and his team, Tishman Speyer offered a $2 million contribution that would go to the bid, and the community board, the bid, other community stakeholders would get together, develop whatever project priorities, programming priorities, whatever they thought were important uses for those funds, and we would say, here are the dollars, and you guys would use those dollars for whatever you deemed priority uses. So that I just wanted to mention that that's part of what's contemplated here. And then this is really just another pretty picture of the piece of Block 4 that's completed. And again, we hope to welcome those of you on the committee and in the community to see it for yourselves. And we'll come back to you about dates. And with that, unless Michelle, you had anything else to add, I think we can take questions.
Thank you, Amir. I just say before I turn it over to Paul, again, I think the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, and the true live pictures are terrific, and standing there is all the better. So we're excited to put that together and to have you all come be inside this magnificent, magical place. So with that, Paul, we'll turn it back to you to,
Thanks, Michelle and Amir. I appreciate it. 2 quick announcements. The a couple of other board members have joined us. Sarah Mills and Joe Astucci have joined since our introduction, so welcome to them. And a reminder to the committee that tonight is a discussion on this and what direction we want it. We would think we want to have some input on. So there's a request for clarification on the DIB and the street and the movement of the eastern side of Hudson Boulevard, as well as a discussion on the formatting of the zoning text amendment and what our opinions are on that. So Tishman Speyer will go back, take our input, and then return to us later with an actual application. So tonight is really just a discussion to get some guidance, give them some guidance as to what our thoughts are. Before I open up to committee members, though, I'd like to ask Amir to clarify a quick thing for me. The zoning on 99, one other thing, and I asked this question earlier, Amir, is on the northwest corner of the lot, people, when you saw that image, if you've walked by there, you'll see there's a new hotel being built there. So that northwest corner of the 11th Avenue and 37th Street is a almost completed hotel, that little corner in there.
That's right.
But Amir, can you give me a little bit more information about how 99 Hudson got to 21.6 FAR? What is the underlying zoning there? And if any zoning bonuses were used to get you up to 21.6, or if those zoning bonuses for Belle Abzu Park were used in other sites?
Okay, sure. So thanks for the question. And you tell me, I plan to leave this up on the screen so we can cycle through slides, but if you like, I'm happy to stop sharing.
I've minimized that off to the side so I can see everybody. So
okay.
I'm okay with it there.
Okay.
If anybody else objects, just let me know.
So, so to your question, this site came with 10 FAR as of right. So without doing anything at all, day one, 10 times the footprint is available in terms of the allowable density. By zoning, another 8 FAR is available through by obtaining these DIB rights that I mentioned, these district improvement bonus rights. DIB rights, and this is where if I stray too far, David Karnofsky should come in and play Mr. Fix It.
No, I like you talking instead of the lawyer. It's much better. Go.
Okay. So
a lot of acronyms, a lot of 3-letter words here.
Last month we went through a very extensive debate on FAR, so we're familiar with that term, and we learned DIB tonight. So people should be following it. But if people have questions on language, raise your hand. All right, sorry, Mayor, keep going.
No trouble. So DIB rights can be obtained in a few different ways. The simplest way is to write the city a check. So there's sort of an inexhaustible supply of these rights, but only to sites like this one that are zoned to accept them. And as I said, there's a prevailing price for those DIB rights. It started out years ago at an even $100 per square foot, and every year the price tracking CPI escalates. So August 1st of every year, there's sort of a recalculation based on the previous year's inflation rate, and it adjusts. So at today's price, as I said, is about $143. In a couple months, there'll be a new price. So one way is to write a check. There are other ways. For instance, you can some of the park or roadway footprint areas where you can't develop new buildings, but nevertheless had some entitlements on them. So for instance, when we bought the red outline site, I said we also bought this upside down L. It had some rights already pertinent to it. And some of those rights could get transferred onto the 99 site to help fill that 8 times FAR bucket. So that's another way to get them. And the third way to get them is this in-kind contribution, which is a mechanism that we used, as I said, twice already, and we're proposing to use a third time. So that's how you get another 8. So that brings you to 18 times. The last 3.6 FAR that's available under existing zoning for this site comes from yet another 3-letter acronym, which is ERY, which is the Eastern Rail Yards rights. These are rights that are owned by the MTA over the rail yards. And for those rights, there's actually a fixed number of them available. And those rights are priced differently. They're based on site-specific appraisals. So if we wanted to buy our 3.6, we'd go through a process whereby the city would engage an appraiser, establish an appraised value of the site, and then there's a formula that's applied, and that the ERY rights are then X dollars a foot. So that's the 3.6. So together, that's 21.6. That's the maximum available. So that's how you build it up. As I said, I can pause if you have any questions so far, or I can continue to talk about sort of what we've done so far.
No, I think that helps explain how you got to 21.6. So that's enough for now, I think.
Okay.
So, but because I'd like to open up to committee members to ask any other questions that they may have. And I have other questions, but I'll circle back and ask mine later.
Paul, if I may, you mentioned the hotel site, just so there's full clarity amongst everybody on the Zoom. Tishman Speyer is not building the hotel site up in that upper corner there on the left of your screen, just in case somebody in the audience had a specific question about the hotel. It is not our development site. We are not building it. So in case
Great,
it wasn't
thanks.
clear from the picture. Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. And I also point out to committee members, you can see on this screen, the block just south of that is the lot K that we've heard a lot about in the news, the proposed upside down tower for NAACP that is now on pause. So it's also not Tishman Speyer, but just to give you perspective of where we are in the neighborhood. So I see Brian, and then I'll follow with David. So Brian.
But Paul, just some clarity, that is not a tower for NAACP. That is not being designated. That is merely press.
No, exactly. That's what I said, Joe. This is what we're seeing in the press. It's nothing's happening there, but to give perspective of where we are, that's the site that has been in the news. Nothing's happening there. Right. Okay, Brian.
Thanks, Paul. Just for some further context in terms of the height, you're asking for essentially additional FAR to raise the building height by 60 feet. I'm assuming that doesn't include mechanicals, and that brings the building to a height of 685. For context, I know you have nothing to do with the hotel that's there on 37th and 11th, but I actually could see it from my window. So I'm curious, how tall is that building for reference?
So thank you for the question, Brian. Let me just clarify first. The before is about 685.
Okay.
The after would be 745.
745.
And these are all rough numbers because, again, we're just in concept design. The thing that wouldn't change is how many extra rights we have. But the way that amassing works is TBD. Right. To answer your question specifically about the hotel, I believe is just shy of it's in the roughly 650 foot range, something of that order, maybe a little taller than that. So not that dissimilar from our base case at 21.6 FAR for our development.
Okay, and then maybe for additional context, the building that is on the east side of the boulevard that it currently exists, the residential building.
Yeah.
What is the height of that?
That one has, first of all, a lower allowable density than these sites, and I believe it comes in at somewhere in the mid 400s. But don't quote me on that. Okay,
and does the 745 include the mechanicals, or is that
that's apples to apples with the 685? Right. So what you're adding is in the 60 feet is the roughly 5 floors.
Understood. Just a comment on the massing, and I know it's just to provide some sort of scale. There you go. Currently, the bulk of the building sits on Hudson Boulevard, and I understand that is sort of eclipsing the existing hotel behind it. But what is of greatest absence in New York City and in the area, what we're losing with the development of this area, is sky. And so anything that could be done in consideration of shifting the massing off Hudson Boulevard, I think would be greatly appreciated. I know it's how you stack the sugar cubes and where you put the massing on the site, but if you could move more of the massing towards 11th and have it step back so we get more sun along, Hudson Boulevard, that would be appreciated. I know this is a way early portion in that conversation, but I would just sort of appreciate that. The other thing I just want to note, though, is if we can go to the thing where you have the two lots that need to be acquired still. So lot, I can't read it, it's kind of small, lot 40 and
48.
lot 20,
Yep.
48, sorry. So right now that abuts the park, but there is still access between 36th and 37th along that alleyway. And so basically what you're talking about is by acquiring this, you complete the roadway. I don't know if that roadway is of any great benefit to our neighborhood. I don't think we've ever been dramatically in favor of having a road there. I mean, I appreciate the shared street concept, but I guess my question is by Tishman acquiring these, this is what is going to lead to I'm forgetting the acronym for your increased development rights.
The DIB.
The DIB. Okay. Quite frankly, what is called an alleyway there is a through street right now. It's more of a through street for the building that's there. I don't see necessarily that being such a great benefit to the community, having a roadway there as opposed to what is currently there. So that's just a thought. We're not getting any more park out of this, is what I'm saying. You know.
Right, and thank you for your comments, Brian. And I guess I would just say again that just, you know, the reason I started with what's mapped and approved as far as the design is because whether it was us or whether it was the city doing it, the obligation currently, again, subject to community efforts that you might engage in to, you know, to change that, is the obligation currently is to build what is approved and mapped. And so that's the reason that we've described sort of how it would play out.
Thank you. Understood.
And just to put a finer point on that, Tishman Speyer didn't, you know, 7 years ago when we were working with everybody to, you know, move around some shrubbery, et cetera, that was in the plan for block 4.
No, I
Yeah,
remember
so
that. I do remember that. That's
Okay.
always been a thing.
Yeah.
And I understand that lot 48 is long been a goner. But, you know, I don't necessarily think that we're losing out if we don't have a roadway there. But I understand that's already well.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep it clear and transparent to everybody who's not as familiar with what happened years ago, that where we are today is because of plans that were done before that we're executing on. That's all I'm saying. I understand your point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to David Solnick and I'll follow up with James after that. David?
Yeah, I'd like to see, and maybe you have a sort of zoomed out contextual drawing of what's going to be around this. I mean, we're talking about buildings and their heights in numbers, but I'm not seeing a visual of how this new building fits into its context relative to these neighboring buildings. Do you have a massing model of, you know, of several blocks that shows this in context? That's one question. Then I had a follow-up to Brian's.
Hey, David, first of all, nice to see you. The short answer is, unfortunately, I don't have one. What I can try to do is, and it's not going to be a substitute for the visual, a perfect substitute, but just describe it to you in words. So just south of us on that site K, that the zoning for that block is currently a 24 times density. So, you know, and so you can imagine a building there that would be, especially if it takes up as it would the full block, a building that could be as tall or taller than the one that we're proposing, even with the additional development rights that we've talked about. South of that is the site that will eventually be 3 Hudson Boulevard. That site, like the spiral, which sits directly to its east, is zoned for a maximum of 33 times. So like the spiral, it could be quite a sizable building, certainly taller than the one either at site K or the one we're proposing. And on the
How
east
tall is
side,
the spiral?
the spiral is about 1,030 feet. And then there's one more block I haven't talked about yet, which sits in between the spiral, or basically just north of the spiral. So it sits across from Site K. That one also has a maximum of 24 times FAR. So like Site K and like the proposed text change for our site, they would all have the same density. As you move north, and so both east of us, where that existing residential building that we've been talking about was developed, and north of us, the maximum allowable density steps down as you move north.
Yeah, I would just suggest, I mean, that's all great, like, but I'm visual and a lot of people are visual. And I think it actually would be in your interest, at least as much as ours, to show what you're saying in a massing model. And, they're easy to produce. This isn't architecture. This is just blocks, sugar cubes.
Completely fair point.
I think if you bring that to the next and subsequent meetings, I think it'll really help people visualize. And if what you've just described is all true and you show all that massing, it's gonna make your case stronger, not weaker. So I think it's in both of our interests to see it.
Great. Thank you, David.
So and then a follow-up to Brian's comment about where the massing goes, above the podium.
Yep.
What was your thoughts? Yeah, if you could go to that. What was the thinking about where it's located?
So I didn't want to get too into the minutia of the way the zoning works, but we call those big floors at the bottom podium floors, and there are some zoning requirements, including along Hudson Boulevard, that require it's called a street wall requirement. And there's sort of a certain.
No, I know. I wasn't asking about the podium. I was asking the mass that's sitting on top of the podium.
Yep.
How it's located. Yeah.
Right. So just like the podium has certain rules about how it has to be masked, just immediately above that street wall or podium, there's a mandatory setback. So you have to set back a certain amount, and so that's what we're showing here. And beyond that, you're sort of constrained because you've got a certain core size for elevators and stairwells, et cetera, and sort of have usable floors. It's hard to shift the building over, and not to mention we don't have the whole block, because as you saw, there's a chunk taken out of the northwest corner. So we are already in a situation where the elevator core sits almost as a side core. It sits as far west as it can in order to make the space efficient and usable.
So it's that chunk out of the corner that's keeping it to the east as far as it is now. And so
that's right,
using the minimum setbacks on those three sides.
That's right. And again, the point that was made earlier is well taken. And as I said, we're in our early stages of this. So certainly these are things that can and are being refined, David, but that's the general rationale for what you're seeing.
Good, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you. James, and after James, I'll follow up with Joe. James?
Yeah, very brief question, very helpful presentation. Going back to sort of the massing and where things are or are going to be, I was having a hard time visualizing where the hotel is. Do you have like an address for the hotel?
I can look it up. It's been in the press, so I can certainly look it up, but and come back to you, James. But the reason you're not seeing it is it's sitting sort of directly behind here. So what you're seeing is the corner of 36th and Hudson Boulevard, and the hotel is at the corner of 37th and 11th Avenue, which sits just sort of behind here. So it's hidden. It's basically our building wraps around it. That's why you don't see it.
You said it was in the press. Do you know what hotel it is?
Well, so yeah, it's going to be, it's slated to be a loft hotel, and David Marks is the developer, and I can look it up for you in just a second.
We're trying to look it up.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Is that it, James? Okay, Joe?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of Paul first just give the background of the DIB and everything, because I think that's important for the committee members who haven't been here. Is that okay? As opposed to questions on the proposal. Is that all right?
Sure. And
Yeah,
Joe,
go for it.
I was just going to say it's 450 11th Avenue. So I just wanted to.
Thank you, Amir.
Sure.
So for the committee members who were not around when Hudson Yards was approved back in 2005, the city came to us and said, in order to build the improvements for this district, which included the subway, the streets, the new viaducts over 11th Avenue, and the park, that they would issue bonds to do that. Not the city, but a separate corporation, Hudson Yards Infrastructure Corporation. And then that would be better and cheaper. There was a big dispute about if that should happen, but finally was approved. What that meant is there had to be something to pay the bonds. And what pays the bonds are the real estate taxes from the new development that happens in this area. The new development happens because the city said, we need to rezone it, and we're going to create new density. The majority of FAR in this area was either 5 FAR manufacturing or 2 FAR or 3 FAR. It has been increased, as Amir said, to much larger FAR. And in fact, the Four Corners, 33rd to 35th Streets, 11th to 12th, has an FAR of 33. That is the densest zoning in the entire city of New York. So instead of real estate taxes being paid to the city, when a new development happens, they do a formula called the pilot, and that's paid to the Hudson Yards Infrastructure Corporation. That pays the debt service on the bonds that built the subway station, the subway extension, the park, and the streets, and the park itself, right? So in the first years, there was a big controversy because the question is, if there wasn't enough real estate taxes coming in, how could those bonds be paid? And the city government, the council and the mayor agreed that if there was not enough money coming in, they would do a backstop, and the city budget itself would pay whatever the shortfall was. And that's what happened. But about 3 years ago, Bob, I'm correct? That reversed? Is that appropriate? Bob?
Yes, about 3 or 4
So now
years ago.
3 years ago, in fact, the debt services being paid on those bonds and Hudson Yards revenue from real estate taxes is actually providing revenue to the general fund of the city of New York. That's a very important piece in this whole discussion. So the real question in front of us is a new change in text to create a bonus that, as Brian noted, is for building a street. However, I want the committee to understand, as part of the bond issue, we were committed that these bonds to this Hudson Yards Infrastructure Corporation would pay for all the improvements. So now we're basically asked to go back and create and to pay again with even more density. So that's one issue, density. On the issue of how the density ran, actually, David, it's really important. That was negotiated very carefully, that the density would be the highest, it would be 33 and decrease as you went north. That was a big discussion, 18, 21.6, 24, 33, a very careful community negotiation with the Planning Commission. But I think the two other pieces that tie into this are this DIB question. Amir, what was the per square foot price on the purchase for the ERY development rights from the MTA? That was to an appraisal, you said.
Yeah, so that hasn't happened yet on 99 because the way it works is you have to obtain all of your DIB first before you can purchase ERY.
Right,
So that-
ERY is like the third tranche or something, I understand that. But in the most recent deal that happened, what was the per square foot price, to your knowledge? Approx.
You know, it was certainly in the probably $300 plus range.
Right.
I don't remember the exact figure.
Right, so sort of the going rate for development rights in past years has been about $300 a square foot. Now, why is that different? Because the MTA, as a fiduciary, wanted to make sure it got an appraised value on development rights at whatever point in time they're being transferred, because they get the direct benefit of this, not the city. The city's DIB, district improvement bonus, instead was done on an initial amount and then goes up on a price index every year. It's not based on a value. So for community board members who've been around, this is the exact discussion we had regarding Hudson River Park selling development rights at a highly discounted price inland when block 675, 29 to 30th streets, 11 to 12 was done. But what I bring to the committee that's a really important issue is this whole DIB thing was to create an incentive for people to build in Hudson Yards because they were not building. I don't know if we really need that degree of incentive today because people are building in Hudson Yards. And one of the things that's really key, this contribution that Tishman, in-kind contribution and the value of it. By the way, I want to say, first of all, they're a fantastic community partner. They've worked with the community forever. They're like upstanding, real people. They're going to go through a real process to do this appropriately. But outside of Tishman and its ability to get things done and to engage, there's city policy here which says if they're going to, let's say it's $15 million or $13 million they're going to put in contribution in this whole process. You divide that by the DIB at the 142 and you get a lot more square foot than if you divide it at $300 a square foot. So they're getting a highly discounted rate and therefore a lot more square footage. So I look at this and I bring this to the committee to consider. This is not just about Tishman and a park completion, let alone the big issue. I've never seen a bonus, a community benefit that's a street. The community didn't want the street. The street serves no purpose. For both people who are not around in 2004, 2005, the original name of this street was not Hudson Boulevard, it was Olympic Boulevard. It was to go from 42nd Street to provide the parade down to the stadium. That never happened. So just because that's what it says in the zoning, and that's where this sort of is, this is almost like an autopilot with Hudson Yards Development Corporation. I believe our community should signal very carefully that we need to look at this. Is the street a more park? Benefit from more park totally makes sense, right? But benefit for street really doesn't really function anymore. The shared street is sort of a nice band-aid on it. It's a great thing. And Amir and Michelle, we totally support that. We've been through this already, right? But how do we unpack this so it begins to serve the broader purposes? The bonds are being paid. There's no need to have such a low DIB price anymore. The city, instead of going to its general fund to acquire and build this park and street, is coming back to our community and saying a 2.4 FAR bonus is the way you pay. We paid already. We did this huge density increase. So I ask everybody to think outside of the issue at hand and the presentation, because this is an honorable, solid developer doing with what it should do within the structure that exists, but the structure needs to be questioned. And as we go through this, figure out how to manage it differently. And the last piece is they are constrained in this entire district along 11th Avenue. You can normally build, we had a long conversation in our last meeting about FARs and residential FARs and caps and what could happen. This doesn't say you can have up to 12 FAR for residential. It says you can have up to 6. And I believe the need now in our district in the city is more residential FAR, not necessarily more commercial. And maybe a solution out of here is talking about some kind of mixed use building. It cannot be accomplished in the current action. These are the kinds of things as we have current actions and figure out how to modify them and make them serve our community, that they can open up future commitments to move ahead. Paul, does this round it out? Because I'd like to take questions just from you if I missed pieces in this.
No, that was, no, I think you hit it well. My thing is, yeah, I'm glad you described the DIB pricing. One of my questions was on that number that's very low in my mind, because I know that with Hudson River Park and with Highline in Chelsea, right, we're closer to $600, $400.
Exactly.
And this is at $140. So to me,
because they're market driven and they're appraised as opposed to a formula that was conceived literally in 2005, 17 years ago. I think we should move past it.
And Joe, I'm glad you pointed out about the underlying zoning that would have 6 FAR for residential on this block as well. We're pushing very hard at Penn Station to try to get more residential there. We're trying to push hard to get more residential west in this area, in Hudson Yards area. So that's something that Amir, you didn't really mention in the underlying zoning, is that there is a 6 FAR available for residential on this site. So it's another interesting component. So Joe, I appreciate your insights on that. Joe, did you have any other specific questions or?
Well, I just asked, I would ask Amir, I haven't heard yet, what is the actual condemnation cost for the small building? Sorry, no. What is your contract value in lieu of condemnation? I apologize.
Yeah, no, thanks for your question. So, and it's actually, I'm glad you asked, because we've been talking about sort of you've been talking about sort of the formula and the budget being divided and providing rights at a certain basis. The reason I went through the process of how the rights are determined is there's an important point in there about sort of the back and forth. And there was a line that said that the city sort of determines what level of reimbursement it will allow as in terms of eligible costs
for the street construction.
For the budget of doing these improvements. And what I was going to say is part of that budget is the acquisition cost of, as you said, the townhouse. And so this is a good example of a situation in which the city has determined that it will reimburse, I think it was roughly, $6 million or so of the purchase of that property. Whereas the contract price for us to purchase it is more like, and I don't remember the exact figures, but over $9 million. So my point being, that's one example of several where, in addition to the costs that are being reimbursed through the development rights and the formula I mentioned, there are a bucket of other costs, which at last check, I think totaled over $4.5 million. So additional dollars that we're going to be spending as part of this process that are not being reimbursed, and that increase that basis that you mentioned.
Amir, this may sound very odd, but I'm sorry, I support you. If it costs $9 million to acquire it, the city should not be taking that out of the revenue of this district. They should pay whatever it costs to acquire it. And that is not efficient. That's the opposite. You're taking money that could have been, that's just crazy. That's just totally crazy. They should pay you whatever you had to pay for it. And they should not be discounting something to get away by not paying something for both purchasing land and building an improvement. That's their problem. And the idea that you would be willing to eat it says to me, it doesn't make any sense here. It really doesn't. Let the city pay for what it should have done, because this project on tax revenue is throwing off funds for the general fund for the city of New York. And the city of New York has committed to build a park in a street if that's what happens here. So is that
great?
Unexpected, Michelle?
Did you want to, Michelle, did you want to add more to that?
No, I was just saying, I think that there's a lot of interwoven city policy comments that Joe brought up, and clearly we can't answer all of those, right? So, I mean, and when I wear my bid hat, which I do very often, and my community hat, because quite frankly, I consider myself a member of the community as well, I understand and appreciate that. I think our esteemed attorney, David Karnofsky, is having some technical difficulties and may not be able to talk in this moment, but I do appreciate the fact that there are some city policies, and vis-a-vis some of the zoning issues you were talking about with regard to residential, you're really also cutting teeth with the state, right? And the governor's office.
No. This is within the current FAR limits. The current FAR limits.
I thought you were talking about removing the 12 FAR cap at one.
No.
That's just
trying to. Okay. In any event, it's there's policy interwoven. Anyhow,
right.
Back to you.
And if you're Michelle, if you're confused by it, I'm sure other members of the committee are confused by it too. The underlying zoning on Hudson Yards has a cap of 6 FAR. The conversation we had last month along 11th Avenue. But the conversation we had last month about the state's budget proposal that had a 12 FAR cap, that's well above what the cap is here. We have a 6 cap on this area. So, all right, I'm going to go to Leslie and then Dolores.
Thank you. My question really kind of delved into what Joe brought up, and looking at the project in terms of its use and whether or not affordable housing could be part of this.
So since the beginning, we've been very clear and forthright with everyone that this plot of land for Tishman Speyer was going to be used for commercial use. So, we have not deviated from that. And, I thank you for raising it, but, we continue to believe that this site will be used for commercial activity.
Thank you, Michelle. Dolores?
Thank you.
So I want to reiterate Joe's initial comment. Tishman Speyer is been a great partner to the community. However, not because of Tishman Speyer, but because of the way that the length of time is taken to develop this property, as well as the city policies and the way the bonds were put together, it seems like we're trying to go ahead and fit the pieces of the puzzle to get this project finally going without looking at where we are at the moment, and locking us into changing the text where we know a good partner like Tishman Speyer is going to do the right thing does open the door for someone else to figure out how to say there's precedent to go ahead and make these same types of changes. And I think that an organization like Tishman Speyer is savvy enough, as well as a good enough partner, to work through how can we prevent that from happening and find a different mechanism, whether that's renegotiating with the city. My only real concern is that you mentioned, Amir, that you're already in contract for the townhouse. And so the ship is sailing. And so I don't know how much opportunity there is if the city has already agreed, since they're condemning the other lot around the same time that you're hoping to go ahead and acquire this other piece. And that makes it very tricky for us as a community. We want to be supportive to get this finally done and to know that we have a good partner to do what needs to be done to make the park as whole as possible. But that land use action does create a problem, not for this property, but potentially for others. And I don't know how we solve that, but I want to just reiterate Joe's concern there. That's beyond the project.
And Dolores, I'd like to point, you said that Amir said it's in contract, and Amir, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said it's in contract contingent upon these approvals.
That's
okay.
The ship has not completely
correct.
sailed.
Yeah,
but it's sailing. That's what I meant.
Yeah, but like anything, it's all about pulling this together, and the public approvals are key, and the shape they take will determine how the ship sails.
Right.
Keep on that metaphor.
So
until we
Dave,
kill it.
Joe and Dolores, so David can't talk apparently. I don't know, there's something with the thing, but he's telling us, and again, Amir, if you want to opine on this as well, go ahead. But we want to the precedent issue, just because again, I think a lot of you know David, and you know that he's going to tell you the straight answer, not like lawyerly chat. So Amir, do you want to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Janine, can you move David into it? He's in the attendee. He's the telephone number, the 917.
I'm trying to, but it's only giving me permissions to allow him to speak, and he would need to unmute.
I sent him a text. I guess you can hear me now too. To press, was it *6 to unmute?
*6 to unmute.
Yeah, *6 to unmute if you move him over, Janine.
I can't move him over. That's the issue. It won't let me.
Oh, you can't. Oh,
yeah.
You can. This is a terrible. Speaking of bad precedents, me trying to do a David Karnofsky impression is maybe the worst idea. But with apologies to David, I'll just explain sort of the process, which is that in sort of engaging on this approach, we certainly, because we do care about the precedent aspect of this, but forget us for a second. The city on its part was sort of extraordinarily focused on that same concern. And so we went back and forth many iterations of the text to ensure that it was tailored really just to this block and to this situation. And I'm not here to pretend that sort of other enterprising people couldn't, in their own circumstances go and make arguments for other text changes. That wouldn't be credible. But I'm saying that sort of as it pertains to the situation with the park and with the blocks that remain, the text, if you were to look at it, very clearly speaks to, completion of block 4 by an applicant, in this case us, who has already, completed the earlier stages of work. So it's very carefully constrained so that there's certainly no way this text in this provision could then be used for, a block 5 or block 6. Again, and I know, Joe, you've made this point before. It certainly doesn't preclude someone else from sort of making some separate application, but I just want to make clear that that was a very high concern of the city and us, and so this text is just about this block.
I want to note from my committee colleagues that this is exactly what city planning told us 1 month ago they could not do for the MTA site, that they could not make it so specific, it had to be generic. So what I want to note is that when it serves the Department of City Planning to do something, they're going to make the effort, and when it doesn't, they don't. And I ask that all the elected officials listening to this who are listening, please hear that, because we just heard that it's so tailored, it's not going to do anything else. However, having been through this rodeo many times, I am still concerned, Amir, that the next guy down somehow, I have never seen in the zoning text a bonus for a street, a mapped street, ever. So just think about that as it sits out there, that not the David Karnofskis of the world, but the sleazy developers, not the Tishman Speyers, will look at doing something like this in the future. That's one of the concerns we're going to bring to the table about this.
All right, I see David Solink has raised his hand, but David, if you don't mind, Christine Berthet has, since she was recognized earlier by Amir as one of the early on members, I'd like to give her the opportunity to ask a question, and then I'll come back to you, David. Thanks. Christine, I think you're with us now.
I'm transferring her over.
Thank you, Janine.
Yes, fascinating discussion that is taking us back many, many years on the price of the dibs. I have a clarification, which has been bugging me, is that you said in order to get those increased for the 8 FAR, Emir, you have multiple strategies, right, that you are using to do that. And one is the in-kind contribution. And, so how many square feet did you buy through that strategy before this proposal?
Well, so we have not actually, when you say buy, I just want to be very careful, Christine, because there are so many different ways of obtaining it. The way we've obtained the
in-kind contribution, yes.
Oh, so I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but we're at, call it, 7.9 or 7.8 out of 8 currently. And a portion of that, a relatively small portion that was obtained by, sweeping, we call it, removing rights over from the park footprint that had some entitlements. So that was the first
No, I understand, Amy. I understand the detail. I'm zooming in on the one you acquired through the in-kind contribution. And I was wondering how much of the pie, what portion of the pie was acquired.
The original one, I mean, right?
If it's not confidential.
No, it's not confidential. It's actually very public.
Okay.
But candidly, I don't have those figures in front of me. There were 2 of those previous contribution in kinds, each of which contributed some of that 7 point whatever to our site. And Christine, I just don't have those numbers for me, but it's very easy. I mean, again, if David were on, he might even know them, but it's very easy for us to get the information to you. And
so if you get that information, that would be really helpful, because we can understand then the, how much square feet you got through that in-kind work, through that budget that the city gave you, right, at the time.
Yeah, and in two separate applications.
Right, in 2 separate buckets.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I just wanted to talk about the shared street. Obviously, what we would like, what I've been, asking for since the beginning, is that that street becomes quote unquote park, right? And so the shared street is like a mixed way to get there. We know that the DOT has indicated that you don't need to remap in order to do that. They can just do memorandum of understanding. So that's the good news. And I would hope that when you look at it as a shared street, you will really make it look like it's the park. You know, with the materials and the plantings, etc., except for the fact that some cars can go through it very slowly. I would hope that it looks very much like an extension of the park. I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Christine.
Christine.
David, I'll come back to you. I just want to make an announcement. If there's anybody else in the public who wishes to speak and you want to just raise hand, we'll pull you over. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Christine has mostly said what I was going to say. I just, you know, obviously, what exactly is the definition of a mapped street versus, you know, what we're doing here is we're trying to push the envelope of this street and make it as park-like as possible. So what's, you know, what is preventing that? I mean, do you have to have cars on a mapped street at all? Does anybody know the answer to that?
I would defer to Christine Berthet for that question.
No, I don't know whether you have to. There are a lot of closed streets in New York City.
There are streets in New York with no cars.
So, okay, so in a way, what difference does it make? I mean, you know, we keep saying, oh, well, it's a mapped street, it's a mapped street with nothing we can do. Well, it sounds like there's plenty we can do. We just continue to call it a mapped street and make it a park. Right? I mean,
the agencies have to agree, David. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Who has to agree?
DOT, yeah, DOT and Parks would have to come
understand.
to an understanding that it's Parks property, not Parks property, it's their property, but would be operated as a park.
Right. No, I understand all that, but it seems to me that in our approval or recommendation, I know we're not making it tonight, but that we can say, we want this, you know, to look like not a shared street, but a pedestrian street, that there won't be vehicular access. And you can, you know, they can continue to call it a shared street, you know, in perpetuity, but that's not really a problem. We don't really care about that.
Great. Thanks, David. JD. And then after JD, I'll go to Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo Dolores's and Joe's concern about precedent, but I want to try to nail some things down. And maybe I could ask Bob about this. As Joe said, and I think Christine has implied, a shared street is better than no shared street. That would be a desirable, not as desirable as a park, but at least desirable in whatever configuration. Bob, the shared streets on blocks 1 and 2, who built them? Who made them? Was that the bid?
The bid's going to build it and get reimbursed by the abutting property owners.
Okay, so now we're talking about block 4, the east side of block 4. The city has committed to building a street. Would they commit to building a shared street in your estimation?
Since they now approve shared streets, the reason why we have streets in the park that are just streets and not shared streets is up until the pandemic, they were not approving the shared streets in our area. That changed after the pandemic. So I would say if you wanted to do a shared street, at least a temporary one, we could probably, if we based it on blocks 1 and 2, get DOT approval.
But if Tishman does it with guaranteed to have a shared street and possibly more of a shared street like David and Christine would like to see, is that, I guess I would ask Amir, is that a commitment that you all would make?
You mean to, well, I think as Michelle may have mentioned earlier, we certainly, you know, and you've seen that level of commitment and collaboration on block 2, like next to the spiral, where we're working directly with Patty and Bob on the shared street that they described. So, from our perspective, you can expect that we would support the community in the very same way up on Block 4.
Make it a pedestrian street like you have in front of Rockefeller Center, a real, live, non-vehicular street. That's what David was talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you. My second part of that is the community benefit, the $2 million or whatever. I would like to propose to Paul and the committee maybe later that there is from this committee a little smaller committee is set up to get a bunch of ideas together with the community about the possible projects that could be presented to you all for completion, if that's okay. And we would have some time, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks to get back to you about some proposals. Would that be possible? Michelle or
Well, if you're, JD, if you're asking us if that's possible, I mean, look, again, to the alignment of Tishman Speyer, right? The plan would be, because community boards cannot accept contributions from what, right, David has taught us, we would give this contribution to the team at the bid. So they would then execute on that. And Patty and Bob, if you want to discuss, or Patty wants to discuss, I don't,
It would be the bid and the board, and presumably the community through the board to discuss these things.
Yes, absolutely. So the net is, look, from a Tishman Speyer perspective, it would be great to keep some of it, close to the neighborhood that we're talking about. But if you all come together and say, hey, we really want to redo a basketball court that's further south. Okay, great. It's,
Well, I think it would have to be because the board is a District 4. So
yeah.
I think we would have to consider a larger area. Oh,
yes. So what I'm saying is we're not going to encumber in any way the location or the use of, it's, you would all come together to figure that out.
Yeah. And JD, I would say any ideas given to you to share with Patty to keep a record of on the ongoing memo that we have of Jesse as to ideas of things to do if the money comes to fruition.
Sorry to jump in there real quickly. That memo that was created in 2019 has been updated somewhat and is in the Dropbox for the committee members to review, so they're aware of what was thought of back then.
Thanks, Jesse. David and then Brian, and I still haven't had my turn, so I'm going to go after Brian. David, did you still want to speak, or did you?
No, I was done.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Brian.
Thank you, Paul. And, I just want to thank the other board members. This has been very educational. And I also just want to say, I also appreciate Tishman's engagement with the community and the work that they've done thus far. I tend to think more in tangibles, and I still keep turning back to 685 to 745 feet. And that's 60 feet of sky that you guys are basically abstractly buying from the community. And I'm just wondering, is the project viable at 685? I know you want 745, but is that something that the board is okay with giving up those 60 extra feet of? And then I guess the question is what are we trading for it? We're talking about certain tangible things, the idea of creating a pedestrian street as opposed to a car roadway. Well, maybe that's worth that 60 extra feet. But for me, I just think 60 feet of sky is a huge loss for this community. It's the one thing we have going for us on the west side is sky.
And Brian, that ties in well with kind of my thoughts that I wanted to share as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
The way I'm looking at this is essentially the land on the eastern side of Hudson Boulevard is already in process to be condemned and turned into some sort of street with, with Christine's and all's input, we'd like it to be permanent shared street. So it's more like an extension of the plaza or park rather than having a vehicular path. So now the conversation comes up about the townhouse, which is being acquired, partially funded by the city, partially funded by Tishman Speyer. And that old townhouse is essentially the request for an additional 2 FAR on 99 Hudson Boulevard. I kind of really simplify it in that way, that this is a zoning text amendment request to add 2 FAR to 99 Hudson Boulevard. Pardon me?
2.4.
2.4 FAR, essentially for a 3-story townhouse that's, blocking a park. And it seems to me that based on, Brian's comments and Leslie's comments, that the community benefit as a result of a 2.4 additional FAR seems pretty minimal. Like what we're getting as a community in exchange for that 95,000 square feet of commercial office space just doesn't seem to be a really robust community benefit. $2 million is a very nice amount of money. Could maybe do a partial basketball court, but it's not a huge chunk of money for the sky high commercial space that, as Brian points out, is going to take skylight from our neighborhood and add height to a block that had previously been planned to be lower. I mean, this sequence of heights was planned years ago, and we're saying, okay, we'll revisit that plan and add height to this 99 Hudson Boulevard. And it's, in my opinion, 2.4 FAR is a pretty significant number to be giving to this with very minimal community benefit. And so I would ask Tishman Speyer to, again, everything I know about Tishman Speyer is you're a good community partner. You work with us on everything, all positive things. And we can't say that about every developer that we work with. And I'm not going to name names, but I can tell you there are a couple of major ones that I'm dealing with regularly that I'm not as comfortable working with. But I would ask you to revisit some of the community benefits and to look at a permanent shared street. So essentially the extension of the plaza on Eastern Hudson Boulevard. I would ask you to revisit the notion of doing residential. This is something that we've pushed for very hard. We're pushing at Penn Station, we're pushing at Hudson Yards, we're pushing at Site K. We need affordable housing in this area. And maybe to think about the underlying 6 FAR residential, maybe we add 2 FAR if it's affordable housing. And so there might be other ways to bring forward true community benefits through this project and through this process. So I know that you've asked us for input, and I think you've heard quite a bit of some of the concerns from these members. And I really look forward to working with you over the next coming months to get the zoning text amendment and the rest of the process moving along. Joe?
So I would move that, taking the essence of what Paul has said and putting that into a simple, here are our concerns letter to Tishman Speyer and to the Department of City Planning to signal out, here are the things that we are really concerned about. So it moves the public conversation forward, and with no allusions to Michelle and Amir that everything gets fixed all at once, but we figure out how we can move certain things now and then get certain things to move later.
I second.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to have a memo come from the committee outlining the points that I just brought forward. Jesse, you look like you have a look of consternation on your face, like you're concerned we're doing something wrong.
No, I just wanted to take off the screen so everybody.
Oh, okay.
For voting sake, I wanted everybody to be able to see everybody.
I never like to vote on a motion without Jesse having some input if it's not going the way we want it to.
No.
Paul, I would like to, could you reiterate what exactly the points we're voting on? Because there were a number of points raised throughout the conversation. So I think it might be good to list them.
Well, I was going to what I had said was that I would ask Tishman Speyer to revisit the community benefits being offered with a zoning text amendment that would increase the FAR at 99 Hudson by 2.4, that the community benefits would definitely include a permanent shared street and to revisit a residential component to the development on this site. I can add in to the memo if people want additional text. Brian had mentioned the height issues a couple of times. There's also, as you brought up, JD, the 2 million contribution. That one I'm not as worried about. I think that Tishman Speyer has a history of working well with us on that sort of thing. So that one I'm not as worried about, but that's
I just think we should note that it's the overall package of things, because if this was not part of government activity and Tishman Speyer was seeking to buy adjacent development rights, it'd be roughly $300 a square foot. That's about $28 million. So we need to look in total, given all of these ins and outs and the complexity of the zoning, how do we make sure, and the city's unwillingness to actually do what it should do, which is build the thing, let alone what the thing should be, that we get a full
Joe,
community benefit.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To add to that, there was also a concern about the precedents
Yes.
setting and how that might affect, say, 5 and 6. I think that's an important concern. Also, there was a stated commitment or resolve or a positive proposal by Tishman to work with the community on designing, if a shared street was to be built, to working with us to design that. I think that's important to put in there.
Great. So David, you raise your hand? Is that up recent or are you voting already? David Solnick, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
Discussion on the motion?
Paul, on that, I wouldn't just simply use the word shared street because that suggests it's vehicular just as much as it is pedestrian. I mean, I think Joe's mention of the street in front of Rockefeller Center, obviously you can still get cars or vehicles to that when needed by lowering bollards or whatever, but it's not a continuously, I don't even know what the best, Joe, maybe you have a better phrase.
Maybe it should be a pedestrianized street. Let's come up with a new idea.
Yeah, I don't even know, what we're trying to avoid is that cars can just pass through at their leisure, no matter how slowly they're going, they can't do that. So the Rockefeller Center is a perfect example of it. Whatever wording gets to that, I think is what should be in the letter.
And to be honest, David, I will make sure to talk to Christine Berthet before and get the appropriate language that would go through Department of Transportation.
Perfect.
Brian, your hand up on the motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I appreciate you adding that tidbit in about the height. So I would like to see that included in the letter.
Yeah. Again, I think we're sort of preceding where we need to be but on height discussion, but I'm happy to add it.
Okay, ready to vote?
I would call to question then. Can the chair call to question? Yes, I can. All right, all those, I'm going to say anybody opposed is probably going to be easier. Anybody opposed to the motion?
I'm a PCE.
Bob is a PNE.
PNE, I mean, sorry.
That's all right.
I'm doing a physical or cultural establishment.
You're an adult gym? What? Any other PNEs or abstentions? I'm going to then say all in favor, and it's unanimous consent. Then thank you all very much. Very robust conversation. Michelle and Amir, as always, great to see you, and thank you for all your work in the community and the great work you do. We really appreciate it. And David, if you can hear us still, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We will look forward to speaking to everybody very soon. We know there's more work to be done, but appreciate it all and just hope you know how much we care about this neighborhood in this past 7 years, particularly during a global pandemic. Just need to get some, warm vibes that, we stuck through it and we were good to our word. So I hope that means something. I think
to hear this many people praise you in a meeting is out of the ordinary, so take it.
Yeah, I don't think I've been in a meeting with the developer. So many people say good things about the developer. So good job.
Thank
all
you.
Right. Thank you very much. For the second agenda item, I'm going to turn over to co-chair JD Nolan.
Thank you, Paul. I want to welcome HPD and Douglaston and Actors Fund. If you all are here, we're going to talk about the DEP site. I think we all know what that is. We met last month about it. It's in ULURP, and last month we left it that this month we would vote on a letter about it. So I don't know if Daniel is here from Actors Fund. I believe in Joel from Douglaston. I believe you both are here. You're the development team. There you are. And
Hi,
I know
everyone.
both of you came to the Block Association meeting of 48, 47th Street and survived some robust questioning. You did it with a lot of grace. I commend you on that. HPD is here. Felipe and Paris and Melissa, welcome to this. I think you pretty much know what the community feels and that we want to work together and find a solution to this. I'll turn it over to Paris or Felipe, whoever wants to talk about it. And if the committee members do not remember what happened last month, we had a presentation and the committee left it at, the committee said we wanted some more movement on the income bands. That was a very important consideration, and we were hoping that HPD would come back to us with some new numbers. Felipe, or Paris, or Melissa, who wants to take over?
Good evening, everyone. I hope that everybody's having a wonderful afternoon and week. Yeah, thank you for hosting us again. We met yesterday with JD, Joe, Paul, and I believe, and Jesse and Janine to discuss a little bit of the status of the conversation on the AMIs. The development team and HPD have been working on making progress on this. Sadly, for tonight, we don't have major updates. As we mentioned yesterday, we elevated the conversation about the donut hole and the AMI mix with our program folks. Program folks are the team related or in charge of the financing of the projects. So we started having that conversation. The commitment is to work hard to have potential updates for the June 1st, before the June 1st full board meeting, where you guys will be voting on the letter with the recommendations for this application. So yeah, we are going to be working on that. Hopefully we will be able to share with you some updates before that meeting. I know that Joe is tired of hearing this from me. We heard you loud and clear yesterday. But we're working on it. So we're looking forward to the discussion that you guys will have tonight about the land use application. Very looking forward to see your comments, your concerns, and how you are envisioning, the position of the community board for this very exciting land use application and for the community.
Thank you, Felipe. I think the board is speaking with the community and for the community and is aligned with the community. As we all know, this was a site that was promised to be 100% moderate middle income. The last administration put in a 15% homeless component. I think the community, for the most part, said, okay, we understand that, but we very much insist on families to occupy that 15% of those units, because most of the homeless in the city are women and children.
Right.
And they need the help. And the community, I think, accepted that. The community is not happy with not having a larger portion of the units to be moderate, middle, or let's say above 80%. And I think if we can move more of the units up, the community will be a little more conducive to agreeing.
JD?
I know Joe, I'm sorry, Felipe, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that or ask you. I believe that Joe shared with Jesse and Janine earlier today the slides or the information that we were committed to share with you. One of those slides highlights the MI distribution and the units. As we discussed yesterday, I think it's worth it to highlight that as of now, as you will see, probably, I'm not sure if you guys are going to revise those slides tonight, but for the community to know, as of now, it's about like 60% of the units are aiming towards the 80% and beyond and above, right, of the MIs. So we have 60% of the units at 80 or above 80, going up to 130% of MI, which is a step forward to the directions that the community board has highlighted in the past. So I think the commitment is to continue exploring how to work out with the 50% of MI, right? I believe that's about like 25% of the units that are like dedicated to that income range. So I think HPD will try to explore how to, move some of those units toward the 80% of MI or higher. That's something that we will explore. But it is, I think it's relevant to highlight for the community that at least as of now, 60% of the units are targeting to households making 80 or more incomes. So that's something to highlight. We also share with you guys stacking plans showing how the units are going to be distributed across the building. And something to highlight there is that on this homeless set aside percentage of the units, as of now, it is my understanding that at least 50% of the units are targeting family size units for the homeless set aside. So that's something to highlight. And I wanna praise you guys because all these improvements have been made thanks to the advocacy that the community board has done. So I praise you. You've been doing a good job in that sense, and I'm sure that you guys will keep advocating in the benefit of the community. So I just wanted to highlight that for you guys.
Thank you, Felipe, and you can rest assured we will continue to advocate. I hope in as respectful a manner as possible. I do have a request, Joe, if you would just mind waiting 1 second, that we do see the slides.
That's what I was going to ask, JD. Yeah.
Is that possible, Felipe, to see, or Joel?
I think Jesse has them.
Oh, Jesse?
Yeah, I could pull up anything too. I just want to clarify which slide you want to
Can
take a look at.
Can you do the AMI one first? The one page?
Sure. Yes, let me just pull that up. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, just bear with me. Get this uploaded.
So call this a senior moment, but if you're going to bring up the slides, hoping you can just give us a brief refresher from what you presented to us last month, just so in case there were not only other senior members like myself, but also some folks that may have not been here last week to get a real sense of what we will be voting on this evening, and just sort of an outline of the project.
Sure. So I'm going to pull up some stuff. I'm going to jump around in the presentation. So forgive me if you see me flipping around.
Yeah.
Like
Dolores, thank you for asking for that refresher. We weren't prepared to present tonight, but we'll do our best.
Yeah. Okay. And then here, I'm just getting it up. I need to just share my screen now, and then we'll be good. I need to have permission to share my screen.
Jesse, you're on mute.
You should be able to.
I know.
Oh, now I can. Great. Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, can everyone see that? We're good. Okay, cool. So again, we had organized some things just in case there were some questions. So to Dolores's point, let me just go back and remind everyone of the project. So here's me flipping through things that we could get back to another time. Okay, so again, we all know the site, 10th Avenue, 48th Street to the north, 49th Street to the north, 48th Street to the south, former DEP or the DEP water shaft site. Our development site is primarily over the open rail cut, the open Amtrak rail cut, and many of you have been working on the open space that will be developed to the east of our site here. Again, in terms of land use actions, normally this is the HPD's part. So I'm going to skip, or I'm going to go through it quickly. So if there's any questions, HPD can follow up. But we have our UDAP, Urban Development Action Area, and UDAP approval for the site. We have the zoning text amendment to establish the new special permit in the Special Clinton District to modify height and setback and other bulk regulations. Again, as you all know, that the height and setback modifications had already been contemplated back with the text was modified for the Western Rail Yards rezoning. But this project and the Elyria, we needed some other additional bulk modifications. So this was a text amendment to facilitate that. I know you are much farther along in conversations about this as it relates to the Elyria. So with that new special permit, 96-112, again, we'd be modifying height and setback to increase our maximum building height from 66 feet to 77 feet. That was contemplated in the Western Rail Yards points of agreement. And we would be modifying the rear yard equivalent. This is to facilitate the shape of our building, which you'll see in later slides. We also are pursuing and seeking approval of a special permit to build over a transit right of way. You've probably dealt with many of these special permits along the corridor here. And we are seeking approval of some easement actions, light and air easements, and an easement to move the floor area from the future open space site to our site, so we can maximize the development potential here within the height limits that are prescribed. So our building will be 8 stories, 77 feet tall, 158 units. We will have 50% of our units will be 2 and 3 bedrooms. The breakdown here, 23% studios, 27% 1 bedrooms, 41% 2 bedrooms, and 10% 3 bedrooms. We'll have on-site laundry, fitness, a fitness room, bike room. Again, we've mentioned this a few times. We've been working closely with DEP and Parks throughout the process, which has been a really wonderful collaboration. But as it relates to the public comfort station, we really had been working with Parks on the design of that space, making sure there's space for the gardeners for their storage and tools, and just taking all that feedback into account. And we also will be having an approximately 5,000 to 6,000 square foot community facility space for an arts-related organization that we're very excited about, and really is all done through the Actors Fund, called Indie Space. Just to talk about Indie Space a bit, they create real estate solutions for independent theater organizations, and so they have rehearsal space and other community space. They're bringing 2 other organizations into the fold here, the Artists Co-op, which had space in the district. I think they left that space during the pandemic, so they're very excited to come back into a space. And Waterwell, which is a theater company that actually works with a performing arts high school a block or 2 away. Design here, again, we going back, looking at the industrial character of the neighborhood, mixing materials like brick and metal panels, having large format windows, and again, trying to break up the scale through materiality and design approaches there as well. Are you a timeline? I'm just going to skip this because we all know that where we are there. So that's the project. Again, sorry for going through that really quickly. I hope everyone got, I hope that was a good overview. But then let's go to the meat of what we're talking about here, which is the income mix. So again, there's 158 units, one's a supers unit. So we have 157 of affordable housing units. This income mix is following the HPD's mix and match term sheet, which has really it's their term sheet that has the highest levels of AMI available. And so we have the 15% of the units that are formerly homeless. We have the 25% at 50% AMI. Again, this is aligning with the term sheet requirements that 40% of the units be 50% of AMI or less. So again, this is really term sheet driven here. And then we have 20% of our units at 80% AMI, 30% at 120, and 10% at 130. And as we've pointed out before, in our original presentations, we did not have that 130 band, but per the feedback from the community and wanting to get as high level of AMIs as possible here, we worked together with HPD to add that band. Also, one thing to note here, you're seeing the relatively recently released 2022 AMIs and rents. So if you're looking at something that we've shared with you previously and you're saying, wait, these numbers are different, that is why, because we were showing 2021 before. 2022 was released about a month ago, I would say, maybe even less than that. And then here is the more detailed breakdown of the unit mix across each of those AMI tiers. And again, as Felipe pointed out, 60% of the units are 80% and above. And you have the 25% at 50, as we talked about, and you have the required 15% formerly homeless. Happy to dig into this more, but I think, and then, I don't think we need to, if you want to look at the stacking plans, we have them, but yes, so here we are.
So thank you very much for that, for bringing us up to date. So there has been no change since the last committee meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I think we have community members also joining us. We'll get to them later. Janine, we'll move them over. But right now I see a hand. Joe, your hand is up.
Yeah. So I want to stay on this mix and match term sheet first. The real guts of what we've been talking about is getting the AMIs to be more toward moderate middle. So I would propose the following, that regardless of our desire never to have donut holes, this project had an imposition of the 15% homeless units, which we accept. And people have said that for a while from the broader community too. But that our goal here is that HPD and the developer redistribute the units currently at 50% AMI over the bands between 80, 120, and 130. And that's what we want them to come back with, hopefully before June 1st. And that becomes one of our conditions of approval. So therefore, the project would be 15% for the formerly homeless and 85% for 80, 120, and 130 as a very simple, direct ask. That's my first point. And to accomplish that may require an issue with financing, because the issue here is that this project uses low-income housing tax credits to bring in equity, meaning investment, right, as part of the overall project issue. And we need to bring HPD back to the commitment of $40 million to subsidize both these projects and the MTA, this project and the MTA project that was separate and aside from any program funding. And they're going to need assistance to make this thing work, because when you take out one piece, something else goes up or down. So I just note it's moving the 25% to across the upper three income bands, and then making a commitment to use a portion of that $40 million as part of the way to subsidize it. Very simple. That's my first point. Can we talk about that, JD?
Yeah, good point, Joe. So we can talk about that later. So Joe has made a suggestion here. Anybody want to weigh in on that? And the suggestion is to move those 50% AMIs up to get closer to the original agreement made in 2009. Dolores, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So one, I'd like to, first off, thank Douglaston and HPD for being responsive. I know that you keep hearing that we're sick of hearing you hear us, but we're finally starting to see that you are hearing us. That could also be because of the developer HPD is working with. That is why that it's moving in the right direction. But I think to Joe's point, the holes leave a lot of people who are just on the edge of being priced out of this community, getting priced out because they fit somewhere in between. And we need to make sure that that's seamless. That big gap that you have from 50 to 80, it doesn't make sense. Again, we're trying to target middle and moderate. We know that that battle is still going on the MTA site, but we think that we have an opportunity here to really get the community to rally around this site. If we get it closer to what was originally thought it would be, and that means using, just as Joe said, that 50% AMI and sprinkling it across so that no one misses out. That is maybe a teacher, that is maybe one of the mechanics that works along 11th Avenue now down the block, that is a firefighter, et cetera, so that they can actually live in the communities that they serve. So I really think that, Joe, I agree. We need to go ahead and not only try to fix the donut holes, but this is where HPD, you really need to go back to that well that was promised, where there are funds to go ahead and subsidize to get this through the finish line.
Thanks, Dolores. I want to ask Joe about that 50%, that range, those folks. There are other mechanisms, are there not, to find housing for these folks?
So our community has had the greatest number of units of 50 and 60% of AMI produced through inclusionary housing. The Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee hears at least 3 to 4 proposals a year that produce on a regular basis those type of income band units. Around 3,000, 3,500 units have been produced. And the issue we always bring to this table is we're not developing a site, we're developing a community. And in the Hudson Yards and the Western Rail Yards points of agreement, we looked at the entire community, and the mechanism to provide the units at 50% and 60% of AMI are specifically from inclusionary housing. And every one of those units is permanently affordable because they created a zoning bonus. So it's not as if we're stopping the production. We're merely saying at this site, make sure we deal with the other income bands that are not being served by inclusionary housing. You're on mute, Judy.
I know. Thanks, Joe. That's an important consideration. I cannot see if anybody else has their hand up. I can't see a full screen.
So I have two more points, JD.
Go ahead, Joe.
The next one is on the zoning issues. I suggest that the same language that we put in the MTA letter, it's exactly the same here about the special permits and the changes and all the business about how they change all the zoning text. We incorporate that position right into this letter because we hopefully will be able to solve some of that in the MTA solution, and then it'll be applied here. So I think that's an important point to do it in the exact same way.
Gotcha.
Joe, can you please be more specific to remind everybody that we are looking to resolve these issues instead of through the text change, through a mayoral override?
Right.
And I think that's important.
So here it's a little bit different, but it's very specific. The idea that the special permit that allows the height or the setback is fine. That's the existing 96-104. It's when we get into the rear yards or how things are masked, though some of those things can be done via the normal special permit for building over a rail cut, but we don't want a new one-stop shopping special permit that you can put together to vary the lot coverage, the rear yards, all the things we talked about a lot in our MTA letter. We want to make it very simple, and the developer has made it clear in meetings we've had that they had proposed simpler language, and DCP brought both the MTA and DEP developers to much larger, grander language. We want to get it down to simple so it serves this site and not changes across the entire preservation area of the district from 43rd up to 56th Streets from 8th Avenue over to the block between 10th and 11th. Is that good, Dolores? Yeah. The next point, which is the board received the stacking chart, meaning how the units are laid out floor by floor by the various income bands on Monday night, but actually board members saw it yesterday. And most of us we got it sent yesterday. Most of us saw it today. So I want to make an immediate recommendation to the developer, which is not going to cause a problem for you in the financing, but really is a problem that if you had come to the Housing, Health, Human Services Committee, you would have heard immediately. It is so important not to have the homeless units in a single line. That's number one. They need to be, if it's a 2-bedroom on floor 6, it's over here. On floor 8, it's over here. We don't want there to be this stigma of that's the homeless line. I know you didn't do it intentionally, but we avoid that at all costs. So please redistribute them. The second thing is a lot of the homeless units, Joel, face into the courtyard and not onto the open space. You've got to mix it up. So again, everyone gets the same sets of views, which is, if you came to the housing committee, we hear that over and over, same sort of thing. And luckily here, everything's the same size, so it's not like it's a problem of market versus something else. And then the last piece is, which we talked about in our briefing with you guys a day ago, is that we want the majority of units for homeless to be for families. Therefore, you have studios. We make a specific request not to have any homeless studios. It's 1-bedrooms, 2s, and 3s, because families can be in a 1-bedroom. That's very common. Because here we need to know that we have no more single individuals who can have multiple social service problems. That's enough. We have enough issue with that on the MTA side to figure out how to make that work. Then the very last piece, we've never heard this. What social services are you doing for these homeless, 50% homeless families? We need to see a plan and some specific service issue, because the idea that Department of Homeless Services may say, oh, they're not getting any services, I would say, Dolores, is a pile of bullshit. And we need just to say that up front. People need help to make the transition to permanent housing when they've been in the shelter system. So we haven't talked about that, Joel. We never got to this point, right? So here we are.
Yeah.
So you need to give us something that before our meeting, the evidence is, like we asked from Housing Works, what is your social service plan? Who will provide it? And how will these folks transition as they need assistance to settle into the community?
Yeah, I can try to field that. The Actors Fund will be developing the social service plan, which is really focused on stabilizing tenants in place. We'll be developing that plan and also developing a robust referral network to make sure that those tenants have access to services. And while there's not on-site service contract per se, we will be developing that plan and very open to this community's feedback on what that looks like.
I think, Daniel, you're going to have to provide that plan that we're going to attach to our ULURP recommendation as we did with the MTA site. So if you can pull together information that how are you staffing it? Who's going to do it? How is it managed? We need to know that, because that's integral to making sure that homeless families succeed in any affordable housing building. And now is the time. And I'm sorry we didn't bring this up last month, because it just, with everything else in here, it's been, a train wreck.
And Daniel, with Joe's the co-chair of the housing committee, it might be beneficial both to the community and the board and to yourself to come before the housing committee to kind of talk about it. It can be very helpful. And if you think the block association was bad, I don't know if you should go before them, but it might be helpful to you.
JD, we don't have time on the May agenda. That's the problem.
I know, but even later, Joe, as they integrate into the community, it might be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Look at things. Joe, thank you for that. Those are good proposals. I don't see a hand up, so Janine, could you take me to the, I think Elka Fears is calling in?
Yes, I'm going to transfer her over. She has her hand up.
Thank you, and welcome, Elka. Unmute as soon as you can. Identify yourself.
Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for the presentation, for the update. Not much update, though. So I just want to say the fault that the Block Association has is not with Actors Fund or Douglaston. It's HPD that's the culprit and has been for quite some time. I don't want to rehash all this history that we've had over the last, since 2009. But I will say, HPD completely disregarded an agreement that was made with the community in 2009, and without any advance notice to even the community board for, they made changes for HPD to disrespect and not only with the Western Rail Yards points of agreement, but it's disrespecting the community, and it's unforgivable. How are we ever going to trust you again? So tonight, I'm glad that they might be looking at a little change in the AMIs. But again, how can we trust you? Is this just more rhetoric? Yeah. It's going to be hard for us until we see it in writing and actually happening. So the 15% set aside for the formerly homeless folks is understandable, and we've always accepted that. And again, we ask that they be families, and what Joe mentioned about that they not be stacked in one single line is something we've always believed in. They should certainly be mixed within the building with other units so that no one is singled out as being a homeless person. That there be services, and what kind of services certainly is very important. And I have to say, I would think some should be on site. Yeah, I know we have a lot of service providers in our neighborhood, but I still think there should be some on site. So we'll be interested to know about that. And I have another question. Who makes the decision whether it's going to be families or some singles? And how will they be chosen? We have lots. Can anyone answer that?
Good question, Elka. Felipe, any idea?
I believe the how you call it, the unit distribution for the homeless set aside is dictated. I think there is some requirements per the temp sheet or the programs that is going to be used. The selection process as formerly homeless, this is going to be a DHS HRA referrals. So in that sense, HPD receives how you call it, like a folder with cases. We make sure that the individuals or families that are going to be part of this package have all the requirements needed to fulfill one of the units, and they go through the interview process then. But basically, it's not like the regular affordable housing units, which go through the lottery process through Housing Connects. These are referrals. So that's the selection process in a nutshell.
But Felipe, they still go through an interview process. That's a standard process.
Right.
Standard part. Because somebody may be referred, they don't show up, or there's something odd, or in other words, they're vetted, Elka. They're not just, you must take this person. That's the most important thing.
That's what I said. Like, we receive the package, and then we make sure that they have the requirement, they meet the requirements, and they go through the interview process.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Felipe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elka.
JD,
yes, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if it's just me, but I'm having trouble hearing you. Could you?
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me better now if I'm closer?
I think that's a little bit better.
Sorry about that. Sarah Mill on our committee. Sarah, welcome. I see your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, just a quick comment as I was processing the quick presentation that was flipped through and some things that Joe was saying about the social services. I'm all for more space for our community and the arts and culture community as well to be involved. I think you cited there was going to be around 5,000 square feet of space for indie space in the artist co-op, but talking about having services on site and making maybe some of that a priority, I was just wondering maybe some of that square footage could be redesignated for services, or somehow maybe those two spaces could work together.
Or just use for it. Yeah, just use for it,
Yeah, that was just a thought I had, a quick comment.
Good comment. Good comment, Daniel. You've heard it.
Yeah, I would say the good news is we have such a wonderful relationship with Indie Space. I'm sure they'd be very open to the Actors Fund utilizing that facility and absolutely integrating the programming with the residents upstairs. So I think there will absolutely be opportunities to utilize that space for tenants.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Sarah. I believe we have Richard Narens calling in from the community. Janine, can you bring him over?
I'm sorry, what's the name?
Richard Marins.
Oh, I see him. Okay.
Hey, JD, while we're waiting for Richard to transition over, can I just raise two minor points that don't necessarily have to be part of a letter or anything?
Go ahead.
But to the development team on the way stations, if we could somehow find a way to make them genderless, not have male, female, that would be helpful. And secondly, and I know this was addressed back in early versions of our letters, there is a feral cat community on site, and so working with the local community to address that issue.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily meriting being in our letter, but just wanted to throw it out there.
Thank you, Paul. Good point. Richard, are you with us?
He needs to unmute. Yeah, he's over. He just needs to unmute.
Great. Thank you. Richard. Unmute. Richard, you're still muted. Richard Marins.
JD, while we're waiting for Richard, maybe someone could call him. Can I come up with a few more items on the general land use items?
Sure, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. Never mind.
First off, I want to thank this committee for all your great work on our behalf. You've just done such a wonderful job representing our community, advocating for us, and fighting for us. So in a lot of ways, we're supporting you. And we want to let HPD and anyone else involved in this project know that these folks are our people. These are what they're saying totally represents us. Their fight for better AMI, their fight against the totally dishonorable behavior of the city of New York towards our neighborhood has the complete support of all of us. And more than that, you've already said everything that we already believe. We need more middle and moderate income housing in this neighborhood. It is such a disgrace that you should foist this project on us without the commitments that were made to a community who's given so much, you can't walk a block in this neighborhood without supportive and low-income housing. And on 48th Street, we have tons of both. So I'm just telling HPD, which is clearly the problem here, the developers and Actors Fund made a wonderful presentation and seemed uncomfortable with the dishonorable behavior of the city and HPD on this matter. We can only hope that they will try to recapture some of the commitments that they made and are trying to renege on. But again, this neighborhood is fully supportive of this committee and our community board in fighting for justice for our neighborhood on this site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard Marins. Janine, do we have any other speakers?
No one else has their hand up.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Joe, you want to talk a little more about? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to note in our letter we should be supporting the open space development adjacent. So we note that it's not part of the project, but it's adjacent, and we support that. And we support the inclusion of the bathrooms for the park, that is part of the project. The next thing is we want to support the art. Can somebody mute Richard Marins? Janine?
Joe,
there you go. Yeah.
Hold on, Joe. We don't have a proposal for a letter yet. Could we see if somebody wants to propose a letter?
I'm just giving like a list of bullets to be included. That's all.
Okay.
We support the artist space and everything we learned last time about it. So we just have a detail as to what that's about. We support the design of the building because we talked about how it fits into the neighborhood and the industrial character around and the scale of it. We support the land use actions, except for the one about the special permit and I talked about earlier. But there's one thing that we have forgotten, and that is there's a very odd thing here about this negative easement back and forth with DEP, allowing there to be DEP to build. We have to support, as part of this, some sort of limit on what anything could be built in this open space. Because the last thing we're going to do is go through this process to get affordable housing and then have DEP. And HPD was very good in the developer in explaining that the easement is about separation of buildings. We don't anticipate ever seeing a building here. And the easement has to be reworded to make it clear this is open space in perpetuity with a limited amount of building. And we're going to need to rely upon not HPD for this, but our borough president and our council member getting this next to make sure we don't end up with DEP having the right to build anything here. Those are my points, JD, and just the ones I talked about earlier.
I think that's excellent, Joe. I would only add to that the bathrooms and the storage space.
Storage
for the
space.
garden.
And then as Paul put it, to make the bathrooms genderless. Good idea, Paul, to get it up to today's standards.
And let's not forget Sarah's excellent suggestion about having some space for,
Social services, right?
yeah. Dolores.
Joe, I think we would be remiss if we don't also include some of the comments that came from the community that they were not exactly thrilled about the size of the building. However, they are understanding. So I think it's important to show that our thinking on this as a community overall has reluctantly agreed to some compromise, recognizing how important this project is. And I think it's key to note that because community members have been concerned about the size and specifically the height.
We can pull that language from the MTA letter, very similar.
So I make a proposal to support a letter outlining what Joe mentioned. And I don't think that Joe needs to repeat all those points again.
Well, we have something before us. We can approve it or we can deny it. So
Deny, I would propose deny unless.
Deny unless, I agree.
I'm sorry, in all the points that Joe proposed, was there, I'm sorry, JD. I'm
just trying to get the motion about the letter. Is it a supported letter? Is it a denial unless?
I'm proposing a deny unless with the points that Joe is pointing out. Again, keeping in mind that the community is overall supportive, but we still have things to work out. And so unless those items are worked out, the letter is a denial with those caveats.
Those things that have to be worked out, do we have a specific language about that?
It's all the bullets. I can repeat it again after Brian speaks, JD. I'll run them through. I got them written down.
Yeah, no, it was about the things that we want worked out. And my question was, how are we wording with respect to moving the units that are allocated currently for 50% into the three tiers of 80, 120 and 130, or I'm sorry, 80, 100 and 130.
So
Gotcha.
let me run through the bullets that we would deny unless the 25% of the units at 50 are reallocated among the 80, 120 and 130. That we are having the same language from the NTA letter about the zoning special permits. So we don't want all this massive change, just something very specific to make this building happen. That we want the homeless units redistributed, not in a line, and also throughout the building. And the homeless units should be no studios, only 1, 2, or 3 bedrooms. And there should be a service plan submitted by the Actors Fund to be attached to our letter. And services should be provided somewhere in conjunction with the artist space on site. We support the open space and the bathrooms, and they'd be genderless, and the storage area. We support and we laud the design, saying it's a wonderful thing that fits into the neighborhood. The other land use actions like the disposition, all these things we support. But the big issue we have here, and we note that this project was already an effort of compromise to begin with back in 2009 on the height. We lead off, there's a whole section of history in the MTA letter. We'll pull that into this one. And then the last piece is that we absolutely have a condition that it is open space in perpetuity, and there's a very limited right for some service buildings or something for DEP, that we cannot have this easement go through as is, because this is our point to comment on that easement. I think if I've missed anything, someone please tell me.
Brian has his
Did
hand
you-
up.
Yeah, is there any mention of percentage of neighborhood preference for the affordable units
Yeah.
in there?
Sorry, Brian. Standard will put it in the 50% of neighborhood preference, right?
Well, in that sense, Joe, right, the project, it is going to be subject to the typical set asides. So,
right, we're just going to recite it. That's all. You know.
All right.
Second.
And we'll also note the information Elke asked about how the homeless families get into that kind of stuff, so we have a record of it.
Bob, was that a second?
That was a second, and JD's on mute. I see him talking.
Oh, sorry about that. I was asking about a second. I see the second. So are there any other discussion about this? If not, all in favor, please just raise your hand. Anybody opposed to this?
Aye.
I hear voices. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank HPD and certainly Douglas and Actors Fund. I know this has been a long process, not only for us, but for you as well. And I think most of us, we appreciate the fact that you are understanding how we feel and how we feel that we have been treated unfairly when an agreement was made, and how important it is to restore that trust. And I think if you come back with meeting our proposals, a lot of the trust will be restored. So that's my last comment. Thank everybody. I see
Jesse has his hand up. Jesse has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry, JD, you said most of everything I just wanted to say. I wanted to really just shout out Joel and Felipe right now, just because I think they jumped in on helping present when they were not planning on presenting, or were actually told that they weren't going to present. So I appreciate their ability to course correct and be able to present. I want to thank Melissa. And I just very quickly, I don't want to take away from JD's comments, but I do want to make sure people understand that, like, unfortunately, the housing, the HPD is understaffed immensely, and just the amount of projects that Felipe and Melissa have under their belt, and the amount of time that they're working on this project and spending time with us. And we're not always agreeing and getting where we want to go every conversation, but they're showing up, and they've got an immense amount of workload on their shoulders. Same with Paris, I'm sure. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
The amount of time spent on these two projects is insane compared to how much is being produced. It's so horribly hard. The hand you've been dealt, guys, is horrible in this, just horrible.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this on behalf of, if Melissa wants to join me and Paris too, but on behalf of HPD, I truly, sincerely, we really appreciate your advocacy, your, like, you know, spirit of always trying to push forward with the community's concerns. I know that we have had our ups and downs, probably more downs than ups, but it's always been with in good faith, in good spirit. And I just want to say or repeat what I told you guys yesterday in our meeting to, you know, the community at large, is that I know that we're working towards a goal. You guys are pushing for your interest. We are trying to keep our eyes and ears open. We're trying to accommodate your concerns. And despite the fact that sometimes, positive results might take longer than expected, or it might seem that we're not going to anywhere, we don't stop working. We don't stop, like, pushing for your concerns internally here at, within the agency. And if we don't get results to you during the CB period, that doesn't mean that we don't stop working. We keep pushing forward. We keep trying to accommodate your concerns. And, you probably have heard me repeating this message throughout the MTA and now the DEP. ULURP is a long process. A lot of steps have to happen until the end. And again, if we don't get results to you during your time, we will keep trying to accommodate those concerns. So at the end of the process, most of your concerns are addressed. Our commitment will continue to keep working with you. And if needed later on in the process, if you call us to give you an update on how things are going, we will be there. So again, I just want to thank you guys for, keep pushing for your interest, for your advocacy, for your passion. We appreciate that. And we will keep listening to you guys.
Felipe and all the HPD team, Paris, I would just ask the next ULURP you bring to us, we have it cooked and baked before we start this process, because that's what makes the most sense to communities like ours who really work hand in glove with HPD. We never want to be in this position again, and we never want to be battling this out in this part of the public process. Earlier, the better. We come to agreement. We have a discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. We've very rarely had an HPD project not approved unanimously. So we'd like to be able to get to that, back to where we were for the last 30 years. So please make this be the last one that we ever do this.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, committee. Paul, are there any other items that we need to discuss tonight?
None that I'm aware of. So,
Well, then I'll make a motion to adjourn, if that's okay.
Second that too. Seconded.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good
all.
night, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good night. Take
Good night,
care.
everybody.